Okay, so this is session 2 of our self-transformation course. And today we're going to be looking at the yoga, its philosophy and practice, and it's the human condition and looking at the mind. So a recap from last week, which was week 4 rather, in our first session. So the purpose of human existence is to help that divine particle, which is us, in us, to evolve. Because this body is here, we didn't create it, it exists, and something is working through it to enable it to evolve. And there's also a relationship between spirit and matter, and both are needed. So the body, which I mean the mind, emotions, and the physical are needed to do the divine will on earth. It's said, without God, it cannot be done. Without humans, it will not be done. So there's a reciprocal relationship between spirit and matter. Even a yogi up in the Himalayas is still doing something. But we're in the West, we're in the world, and we're here to work and listen to something higher within ourselves. Now, Sophia, there's some notes in the folder directly behind you for this session. To the right. Yep. Now, so as part of that working with spirit and matter, we have a choice. We can either be a conscious servant or an unconscious slave to our own personal desires. So the whole essence of the spiritual life and what we're going to look at in our course is being able to act consciously and serve the one, as opposed to acting unconsciously and being a slave to our desires and habits and all the rest of it. To help bring that about, there is yoga, which is essentially from Patanjali. His perspective is the cessation of the fluctuations of consciousness or the movements of thought. But it's a process of integration, because unless we're integrated, we can't make sacrifice or yajna, sacrifice our self-interest, and therefore we cannot do our dharma, which is to maintain order in the universe. So that reciprocal relationship between ourselves. So in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, Krishna has to teach Arjuna about yoga to enable him to be the right actor, so he can then undertake self-sacrifice and do what needs to be done. And the purpose of the Theosophical Society is to bring that about as part of the work of the divine, because the society was formed in 1875 by 2 individuals who were inspired by, if you want, perfect human beings. So there's a lot of history about that. We won't go into that now. So that was a recap of last week. Okay. So all of our practice consists of a movement from reaction to response, because essentially humans are part animal and part God. We're halfway between the animal kingdom and the superhuman kingdom, or perfect human beings. So we can either react in an animalistic fashion or in a more conscious fashion. In that sense, we are ruled by the forces of nature, or prakriti, and we are unrefined. As such, we need to become Samskrita, or well put together. So there's a shift between reaction and response, between being unrefined as opposed to being more integrated. In the Christian tradition, they talk about this as metanoia, or commonly called repentance. But it actually means a radical reorientation, a 180-degree turnaround of how we've normally lived. So we're putting aside all our self-interest and egotistical motives to act in the Christian tradition selflessly and following God's commandments from the Gospel of John, as it were. So in that sense, yoga is an alignment and integration of our body, which is at all levels. From there, we can get clarity of insight and therefore know what to do. There was an Indian philosopher, Jiddu Krishnamurti, who said, well, when your house is on fire, you don't dilly-dally around. You know exactly what you have to do and why. So when there's clarity, there's action and there's no confusion. And that is insight, or jnana. So in the Gospel of John, there's a story about a crippled man. He's living, he's about 38 years old. He's beside this pool, and the story about the pool, and there's a lot of other people around the pool. The story about the pool is that it's blessed by the angels, and when the water ripples, the first person to get into the pool is healed and blessed by the angels. So this guy's crippled. He's essentially symbolic of, he's been living in terms of self-interest and his ego, but he's the most switched on person around the pool because he's totally aware of his condition. So he's unable to get into the pool because everyone can get there faster than him. So Jesus, comes upon him and sees him there and perceives there's a connection, there's a perception that Jesus realizes he can help this fellow, and vice versa. He realizes he's in the presence of someone, of great power. So they talk, and he basically blesses him and said, look, pick up your bed and walk. So there's a connection, and he's able to heal this fellow, and he gets up and walks. And he runs into him later on in the temples and reminds him to live a pure life and not go back down the route of his egotistical ways. So this is what is required of us with our sense of awareness and living a little bit differently. So Patanjali talks about suffering and sorrow, and he says essentially suffering is caused by the misidentification of the seer with the seen. So there's consciousness and there's the world. And we identify with the world, we identify with our car, our house, or whatever it might be. So long as we do that, that's going to prevent us from having clear and deeper insight of what actually is. Similarly with sorrow, Patanjali is suggesting that there's a mismatch between what is actual and what is thought. If you think of children and bubbas who, and all your mums and dads out there, babies are and they're born, they're very happy and joyful. They're not conditioned by any thought. Everything just happens spontaneously and flows in and out of them. They have that simple mind. Whereas humans, we have an idea about how things should be. When it doesn't go the way we want, we suffer. And there's an example there from a saying there from the book by Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. If you don't get what you want, you suffer. Even when you get what you don't want, you suffer. And even when you get exactly what you want, you still suffer because you can't hold on to it forever. So, happiness is to be found within as opposed to without and outward things. They serve to bring about the happiness that's within us naturally. So, everyone has different tastes, different things that make them happy, clothes, whatever it might be. And that has to be the case, because if it wasn't, we'd all be uniform and everything, we'd all like the same things, because happiness would reside in everything out there. But happiness resides in here, and all of the world's objects, and because they're very different, enable us to generate some happiness within us, which is why everything is different. Everyone has different likes and dislikes. Now, these are great analogies. These two movies, you've probably seen most of them, both of them. And it's symbolic of Plato's cave, with the shadows on the wall representing the unreal. And the person observing the shadows thinks that's reality, but it's not. Reality is outside of the cave. So with the Matrix, there's a saying there, we're all slaves, we're born into bondage, we're a prisoner of our mind. Similarly, in the Truman Show, we accept the reality of the world with which we are presented. So all of the sages are saying, and Ramana Maharshi in particular, and Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, we've got some of their books in the library, they ask us to question, who is it that thinks this is how the world is? Who is it that thinks, I like this, I don't like that, you're good, you're bad, whatever it might be? So the sages are asking us to question the reality of the world with which we're presented. Because in the Truman Show, if you've seen it, he takes everything to be real until he's about 30. Then he starts questioning because he thinks things are not quite the same, they're quite different. Something doesn't feel right. Similarly, in the Matrix, when Keanu Reeves meets old Neo, it's like Morpheus, Samuel, the other guy. Anyway, he says, you're here because something doesn't feel quite right to you. So we're here, in a sense, trying to create a new society because something's not right for us in society and everyday life. So we're thinking about what is really real. And all of our traditions and the spiritual traditions tell us that we can get out and find what is real. We can get out of the prisons of our mind, get out of the world with which we think is reality. So these are all of these two great movies represent that idea which has been taught throughout the ages from the sages. And Madame de Salzmann, who was Swami Ravindra's teacher, she says exactly, we are under the domination of the thinking mind. This is our slavery. To see without thought is the discovery of reality. And that is all of the sages are saying the same thing. We have to be able to see clearly, to have a deeper perception of and to know reality. Catherine Mansfield, who knew Madame de Salzmann and was a pupil of Gurdjieff, who died over there in his school, she talked about the two streams. The normal world, 95% are in it, and the 5% are in the second stream, trying to wake up. And she says all of the world's sufferings and sorrows, if you like, what helps us can help us move from one stream of the world into the stream of waking up, the second stream. So there is a shift in awareness and consciousness that can happen. So essentially, this summarizes briefly our human condition in terms of we're all in prison. We need to wake up and get out of prison. As the Buddha said, there's nothing different between you and I, except that I'm awake and you're asleep. So, and the Buddha said, to untie a knot, all we need to know is how the knot was tied. So if we know ourselves, then we're out of jail free. So what we're going to look at a little bit here, and this is the problem, that we're all caught up in this matrix, if you like, and the unreal. So we're going to have a look at how this happens and understand it a little bit more. So this takes into account specifically the Yoga Sutras. So there's two components of our psychological makeup, which are the vrittis, which are the distractions of the mind. So these are personal and relative to each of us individually. So everyone will have different movements of thought, different human conditioning. And then there are the kleshas, which are the cosmological forces which constitute the psychological reality of the human being. So these are the inherent deep aspects that are in all of us and are the same across the board, of which we're all subject to. So we'll start with the vrittis. Now, these may be pleasant or unpleasant. So this corresponds, obviously to behavioral psychology, so reinforcing and punishing. So you have true knowledge based on perception, inference, and valid testimony. So thinking, rationality, all of that, which is good and has its place when you've got to plan for your retirement and get to work on time, cook dinner, all of that, not a problem. But if it's an impediment, according to Patanjali, if we want to have a real perception of reality and go beyond thought. Similarly, with false knowledge, it's a conception with no basis in reality. We're all make up false ideas, etc. So there's a movement there in the past, future, never really much in the present. So thinking has its use, but it's not helpful for us if we want to have a deeper perception of reality and find out what is really true. Then there is imagination. So, wishful thinking, fantasizing, etc., driven by fear and self-importance. And that's driven by the web of desires without purposeful action. And what we really want to be able to do is act consciously without self-interest. And then there's sleep, which is a metaphor for a lack of forgetfulness, if you like, of ourselves, or as Gurdjieff talks about, we live mechanically versus living consciously. So it's having that state of awareness. You get home, put on the TV, watch the news, whatever. just watch yourself and see how you do things a little bit habitually, and try and be a little bit more conscious, because that actually can. Because essentially, we need to be totally, fully aware from moment to moment to moment to moment. So, with sleep, and there's, in the Christian tradition, like in the Garden of Gethsemane, the disciples couldn't keep awake for Christ when he was going through his transfiguration. They all kept falling asleep and lost their sense of awareness. Similarly, in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, Lazarus, Christ goes to wake him from sleep, which is a metaphor from, realizing that he thinks that all this is, but really there's something more. So Lazarus was quite evolved and was able to go to a deeper level and have a perception beyond what is normally at his level of awareness. And then there's memory, obviously recollecting past experience. We live in the past, thinking about how things were, wanting them to continue into the future. So these are standard, the 5 ways which Patanjali describes of how the mind operates. There's a handout there on the second folder there for you, over there. Sophia will help you. Okay, so now we'll go to the kleshas. So these are the more cosmic components of our nature, our psychological makeup, all of us. So in the Indic traditions, there is ignorance. That is the key in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, and in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Humans are ignorant. But if we get rid of that ignorance and wake up, then we can perceive reality. So, it's seeing the transient as the eternal, and pure as pure. So it's not having that clarity of perception. So what we require is direct perception. And to do that, we can go into meditation, and basically samadhi, having when there's no sense of I left. So that'll comes later. So we've got to be able to use this knowledge. For example, coming to Theosophy and learning about the stuff helps us to see where we remain asleep, where we don't actually evolve. So ignorance is a key component of the human condition. Then there's a sense of a separate self. Now, HPB talks about this in The Voices of Silence as the great heresy, the fact that we think we're separate. Now, human beings, in terms of we all come from the one, there's involution in consciousness, there's the outward and then the return. So having a separate self is necessary to a point. But on the return journey back to the one in full consciousness, the sense of separate self is not necessary. It's not helpful. On the way down, it's good to be a big ego, but you need a big ego to get rid of your ego, paradoxically speaking. So there's a shift from having that interest on oneself and thinking one is separate from the rest of the universe. Then there's attraction and repulsion, which is again your reinforcement and punishment. So, dwelling on pleasant experiences, clinging to unpleasant experiences. Gurdjieff said we're all attached to our suffering more than our pleasures, because, someone insulted you, you remember that for a week, as opposed to someone, complimenting you, colleagues in the office or whoever it might be. Yeah. And then there's clinging to the status quo. So that's wanting things to remain the same, my way or the highway. I want things to carry on for me. I will not allow anyone to get this position, or, I will stay here. I will remain the president for all of eternity. I will let no one else have a go at this role. All of that stuff, and you can see it everywhere. It's incredible. And it's interesting, like St. Paul said, I die daily. You have to die to ourselves psychologically. I think it was the last week we had a Sufi saying, if I die before I die, then when I die, I do not die. So it's not, so there's discontinuity from moment to moment, not getting your own way, but being aware that that's fine. I mean, yeah. So, and change is a norm, right? It's the law of the universe. You can't not change. Things will come, and if something is meant to be in your little precious position, and it's going to go regardless, no matter how you try to hold on to it. So, yeah. Okay, so now we're going to take a shift in terms of what's talking about in the gospel, in terms of beingness and just I am. Because what we're looking at in the virtues and the kleshas, it's all about I am this, I am that, I like this, I like that, me, 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 me. Whereas there's a shift in terms of just the being. So this is Gate 3, Colin McCann, the I am picture that he wrote, painted rather. So in the Greek, I am is ego eimi, a divine name, which is Yahweh in Hebrew. And that is the name of Jesus in the English version of Joshua, which in turn comes from the Hebrew Joshua, which literally means Joshua saves. So if you look at Jesus' name, it means I am saves. And then you get the saying from the gospel there in chapter 14, I am is the way, the truth, and the life. So it gives a totally different take on that saying, because normally if you look at it as a literal interpretation, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and therefore the understanding is that Jesus is the only one you have to believe in, and all else going to hell and all the rest of it, right? For that literal interpretation. But if you understand what the name I am actually means, then it gives a whole different meaning and connotation to what I am actually is trying to say to us. So it's a different way of living, which is what we see here. So then further along in the gospel, I am is the real bread of life. So it's the manna from heaven, as it were. Now there's a story, Jesus is by the Sea of Galilee, and the crowd are after him, asking for a sign. So he takes his disciples higher up the mountain, and then he says, look, we've got to find some bread to feed the crowd. And there's a little boy there who's got a little bread and a little couple of pieces, couple of fish. And this is symbolic of that he has actually some understanding of the meaning of life and insight, as opposed to the disciples that have no bread and no fish. And Christ, he tests his disciples. So he asks Andrew, who was belittling the boy, he was going on, this is not going to do much for us, these little bit of bread and a couple bits of fish. So there's an emphasis there on quantity versus quality, whereas Philip, when Jesus asked him, how are we going to feed these people to buy bread, and he talks about 200 denarii would not buy enough loaves for every one of them to have a little. So again, there's an emphasis from his disciples about quantity versus the boy who has an innocent heart and is willing to share. He has a little bit of that deeper insight. So it was a lesson for his disciples that even, to have a pure heart, a trusting heart, a simple heart is better than any superiority of one's mind, thinking that one is more spiritual than anyone else, which is what was happening with the disciples, because they were different levels of understanding and awareness. And he was teaching them a lesson from this little boy who symbolized with his little bit of bread and a couple of fish that he had some insights that these disciples didn't. Hey?
He's giving up his lunch.
Yeah.
2 pounds of, I think it was 5 fish.
Yeah.
Which
So,
are probably not much bigger than sardines.
Yeah. So Jesus took that as a little lesson for his disciples. So the transformation then, the I am is an instruction for us to live the life, okay? And the disciple is the one who lives the teaching, and the teaching of I am is to seek God within oneself. Because if there's just being an I am, not this, not that, then it's got to be found within, because everything without is this and that. So what we've got here in this diagram is a combination of Jesus is both Son of Man and Son of God. So he is divine, but he's also human. And we will get to that point as well, where through aspiration, we aspire to something higher, and God, from above, descent by incarnation. And in the middle, we're met through I am. I am is the way, the truth, and the life. So it's coming to a state of awareness, a state of being with God. And God comes from on high, as it were, and we come from below, and we meet in the middle. There's an exchange of energies. And St. Paul says, all at last attain to the unity inherent in our faith and our knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, measured by nothing less than the fullness and stature of Christ. That's from Ephesians 4:13. So here, in terms of what we're talking about earlier about the kleshas and the vrittis, so you've got the vrittis, the movements of thought, relate to the individual. So this is the Son of Man. So we all got different vrittis, different conditioning. But for the Son of God is the level of kleshas, where we undergo a radical transformation of our entire being to become awake. So there's that connection there. We become Jesus, the Christ, both Son of God and Son of Man. So natural man, we're out in the world doing our thing, not interested in unity or anything, trying to get to the top of the ladder, as it were. A little few more incarnations we learn through the school of hard knocks, and we get to be a spiritual human being, go a little bit deeper. Then we get a chance to link, like with the I am, get a chance to link with the Son of God. And we're blessed by the one coming from on high. So that's essentially our journey in terms of looking at it from a Christian perspective in the Gospel of John. Okay, so there's need for inner unity. So we have components of our nature, our material and spiritual nature. And there's examples from the Gospel of John which are really good. And this one here is a Samaritan woman who is a seeker from God, and she goes to a well on a mountain to draw spiritual sustenance. And she runs into Jesus on the mountain. Now, here's a man, he's a Jew, and the Samaritans don't engage with the Jews. So there's an example here of she sees him as a male and a Jew at an outer level, and doesn't perceive what is really beneath and within him. But she is a seeker, and she's honest and open-hearted in her seeking. So she starts to perceive there's something more to this individual. And he liaises with her, engages with her, and invites her to see more deeply into his nature. And she comes to realize that she's in front of a prophet. And he says, I am who is speaking to you now. So now this woman has many husbands, which is symbolic of all of her energies are all over the place. She's not integrated. So he has a little bit of time with her, and the disciples are not with him, and they come later on when this exchange is happening, but they stay away because they can see that there's a sacred moment, a sacred exchange happening between Jesus and this woman, and they don't interfere. And then she goes into town and says, I've seen this Messiah, come and see the prophet. So it's symbolic of her being a sincere seeker, but obviously not totally integrated, but she has enough insight to see the Christ and realize that he's something far greater than she, and he's able to help her. And he stays in town for a couple of days longer to work with her, to help her. Again, from chapter 8 in the Gospel, there is the story of the Pharisees brought the woman to Jesus who'd committed adultery. So sin in the original Greek is arimatia, which means missing the mark. So it doesn't have all those literal interpretations you might get at a higher level of going to hell and all the rest of it, and damnation and all the rest of that stuff. Okay, it literally means missing the mark. And if you look at it from an inner perspective, adultery is a mixing of levels of the true and the false, the unreal with the imaginary. And this woman actually does this as a symbolic, as do we all, because again, it comes back to being integrated, which is what yoga is enabling us to do. So our thoughts and our feelings and emotions are not all over the place, but centered. And we all commit adultery until we find one with the divine. So, we're all sinning to some degree. And it's interesting because even the Pharisees are able to go to a deeper level. The Pharisees represent the human mind in their own self-interest and walk away in the presence of Christ who, what does he say? Those of you without sin may cast the first stone. So if they actually were without sin, they wouldn't be casting any stones and bringing to this woman to him in the first place. So, and they were able to listen for a time and go to a deeper level and walk away. And, she's the elect on her own with him, and he says, sin no more. So again, it's an example for us to maintain our equilibrium and be still in our daily life. Again, another story from the Gospel, chapter 10, the shepherd gathering his sheep, symbolic of all of our energies and our personage to be integrated again. And Jesus talks about I am as the sheep gate. So it talks about going through the gate, following the real shepherd. And the disciples know the shepherd, which is the divine, which is Jesus, the I am, the way to live, really live. So they follow the divine. So it's again about integrating these components of our nature. And Ravi talks about no one can make themselves God, but they can empty themselves to be filled by God. And that is our choice. That is our task. And then all of the traditions talk about the struggle between the self and the ego. So this is a picture of the magic head from the Zohar, which is a Kabbalic text. And I got that as a young man, put it on the wall because, the light in the dark. And it's all. So yeah, and this is again the story of the crippled man by the pool, which I talked about earlier. He knows he needs to obey his higher self, but he can't do it. So we've all got this kind of struggle and tendencies going on within us to be able to control our energies. They're always outward tuned, but to come back. I remember when I was growing up, primary school, this fellow, he was bigger than me. Man, he was so angry. He was a friend, but then just 1 minute he would switch and he'd just start beating you up. I was just like, because no control, as it were. Felt sorry for the fellow. And then he moved away and I never saw him again and I stopped getting beaten up. But you know what I mean? It's like that energy has to be integrated. So this is our struggle, our integration. And we're not doing anything unnatural. We're just doing it faster than usual, as I said a couple of weeks ago. Because that's just the human condition. I mean, we could wait till the end of the cycle of manifestation, but we wouldn't have helped anyone in the interim. Yeah, so that's for the formal slides that I have, and on the handouts that correspond to it. So happy to have some chat, some questions. Okay. Alrighty, question time. Any comments, thoughts?
I think
Okay, Murray.
One of your earlier slides, you mentioned imagination,
Yep.
and the one above it, if you remember off the top of your head, maybe you show the slide again.
Oh, right. Okay. I've just taken it off. Hang on. I'll tell you from my notes. Hang on. It was false knowledge and true knowledge. True knowledge, false knowledge, imagination, sleep, and memory. Those were the,
My question is, there must be some purpose in imagination.
oh yeah, fine. Everything has its purpose at this level. So it's like a tool, a piano, a car, whatever it is, great. But don't let it control your life, you know? Like Blake's not here, but he's online. He plays the piano really well, right? But if he's here every night showing off being a little ego, that would not be good for him. Not good for any of us. So it has its place, right? Play the piano, nice, but don't let it control your life. So imagination is good, thinking is good, you know. You got to do your job, right? Elena's husband is working tonight as we speak. He's got to work, got to do it, got to use the brain. But realize its limitations. Like I met this fellow when I was 22. He was a guitar maker, an American fellow. He toured with Santana and all that and had lots of drugs, but he made great guitars. Anyway, he was about my age when I met him. He probably might be passed away by now. I remember he said, know your limitations. So no imagination, no thinking, know its limitations is fine, and then go beyond it. Use it for what it's need to be used for. And this is what Ravi has got through all of these texts and his commentaries, is the reciprocal relationship between the divine, material, and the spiritual. Both are needed. A lot of emphasis is on just the spiritual and, you know, sit in the Himalayas and do whatever. No. It's got to be both. Without God, it cannot be done. Without humans, it will not be done. As above, so below.
It's necessary to see that there is something beyond the immediate physical. And it's only when you have the imagination to see beyond the immediate physical surroundings that you start the journey in the first place.
Yeah, everything is necessary. So yeah.
Are we not animals?
No. But the problem is that that's very hard to tell. I mean, it's like a fish in a fish bowl of water that can go out of the water and do whatever it needs to do. All it knows is the fish bowl, right? But there's more, there's a big ocean out there. It's the same with us humans. There's a whole world out there that we have no knowledge of, and yet the sages tell us it exists, which is beyond what we think our reality is.
Is there one just another one?
Essentially, yeah.
So do you repeat it?
Oh, Gareth was saying about the mind, that we're more than the mind. So yes, we are. It has its purpose, but it also has its limitations. And our goal is to go beyond it. And all the sages say reality is beyond thought. There is another world out there that we don't know. So this ocean is out there, but we're stuck in the fishbowl swimming around and round and round. And it's nice in the fishbowl. We get fed, you know, lots of bubbles going in there. Whatever analogy you want. And, you know, and the cat walks by and you think, ooh, it's a bit rough, you know, on the bench. So yeah, we've got to go beyond thought. So that's the suggestion. That humans are more than what we think we are.
If our mind is nearly another one, then what is consciousness?
Well, that is the big question.
Yeah.
Because no one can say what it is, only can say what it's not, right? All the sages, they cannot describe it, but they say it's good. Yeah, I can't define it, no one can. And yet it exists, right? That's the suggestion.
But if we
I'll come to you in a minute, Chris. I'll come to you next.
do we need
Dean.
to know imagination for the spirit side of things? If that just seems right, isn't that enough? Just, you know, don't we have individual things that are we're searching, but we might go through a whole list and one of them would be right. Something, if you have your own innate senses on, then something just seems right when you do it to you. Okay.
Yeah, Dean is talking about imagination and the use of it and going searching and finding something that's right for you. Yeah? Yeah. No, absolutely.
There's lots of ways to hone in on the world that we're talking about, the spiritual world. You know, individually we can come in from different places, directions.
Oh yeah, no.
It just seems right.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's all the analogies about the spiritual mountain, right? And Krishna says, whatever path one approach to me, I will accept them. So you think of the mountain, we're all at the bottom, there's various paths, right? But as you get higher up, the paths become fewer and fewer. And all the sages from the north, south, east, and west all start to agree that this is the nature of reality. Now, you're on the bottom of the mountain over there, I'm over here, we're going up different routes. We're all going to argue about what's reality, right? But as we get higher up, there's less arguments, which is great. Happiness. So yeah, it's no problem. Right, Chris, I'll come to people online, then I'll come back, Phil. Chris, go.
Oh, thanks, Simon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go. Go.
Yeah, okay, yeah, very thought-provoking. It's great listening to this. I just wanted to say that sometimes we can hear clearly the person speaking in the hall, and sometimes we may miss a bit. Can you please repeat their comment or question?
Yeah, that's what I just did.
Thank you. Yeah, I know you just did that then.
Yeah.
But that was what I was wanting to say. Thanks, Simon.
Okay. Anyone else online for the moment before I come back to the hall?
Hi, Simon. Just a thought. You mentioned, I think Ravi has mentioned both the spirit and matter, both of them are needed. But I remember something which SPB has mentioned. There is no space for spirit and matter. Only one can. There is space for only one. So just a thought.
Yeah. This is, see, you're in this a little Advaita Vedantist, aren't you, Ganeshi? Coming right. See, this is the thing. At the mountaintop, there's only one, great. But at the bottom, it's very different for us coming up the path, right? So what we need and what the sages need are totally different. It's like Krishnamurti, right? He said, they asked him about reincarnation. He says it's a fact, but it's not true.
Because we as a true self, we don't have a death. We are only taking bodies. We are taking new bodies, like we are driving different cars. So this reincarnation is a fact, but it is not the truth. Like the sun is rising in the east, it is a fact, but it is not the truth. The stars are twinkling, it is a fact, but it is not the truth. The sky is blue, it's a fact, but it is not the truth. Like that we can go on.
Yes, so we won't go on anymore. No, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. So this is the paradox, right? The paradox, it talks about it in the way that Cecil Rowley talks about paradox as one of the laws of the universe. We're here, but what's the purpose? To help something evolve. And yet it is already absolute. It's like what I said a couple of weeks ago, a free being limited itself that we may exist. One of our fellow theosophists from India in 2001 at the World Congress said that, and I've never forgotten it when I was younger. And it's like, why does it need to do it? It's already absolute, but something must happen, right? So there's some factual stuff going on, but there's also some absolute truth stuff that's going on at the same time. So don't bang your head about it, Ganeshi, okay? Don't worry about it too much more. Okay, Phil.
Hey, I was just wondering, because I know that throughout the course of it, like Jesus sort of venerated children and sort of as somewhat thing more divinely attuned to the truth, and that's kind of a reoccurring thing. So I guess I'm wondering, as you mentioned here, what qualities children have that make them like that, and how do we recapture that whilst the Pandora's box of adulthood and maturity?
Okay, so this is the big question, Philip, is children are innately innocent and open and aware, intuitive, and how do we capture that state as adults? Because we grow up and get conditioned and all the rest of it. And this is the whole practice of our course on transformation and reading these scriptures and studying them. It shows you how, when we become adults, we catch ourselves up and trip ourselves up, entangle ourselves up. So we are essentially, what did Christ say? You have to become like little children to enter the kingdom of heaven. So it's a state of consciousness. So yeah, we're going back to that state. So all of this, what we're going to study and what we looked at tonight, is how we get tripped up and what we can do to stop ourselves tripping up, and therefore change our state of awareness and get back to that innocence of our children, kindredness, you know. Yeah, when we're kinder children, yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Barry.
I think it's something that like what you just said. I was trying to wrap my head around what you said earlier. Supremedius, misidentification of the steel in the sea. Misidentification of the steel in the sea. I was turning that in my head. What's that about? How do I wrap my
I
head?
can't hear, what was it?
Yeah, misidentification of the seal in the sea.
Oh yeah, okay.
Well, I think you told me something, some of the work it out on right on this, that it's a fish bowl analogy.
Yeah.
That, you know, if you only see the fish bowl, you don't see the sea. That's the view that is dedicated.
So the seer and the seen is, there is identification with the body. So what is seen, we identify with it, and as the seer, there's a link. So if you think about in a movie, like this is the analogy Ramana Maharshi uses. Can you hear me online okay? Okay. So he talks about a projector putting film onto a screen, and he says the eye, the seer, well, the ego identifies with those images on the screen. We think we're the movie, we're parts of the movie, when really we're the screen behind of which the movie is playing, consciousness, if you like. So he says because we identify with the body, the me, then there's that connection or confusion between the seer, which is the absolute self, the spirit, if you like, but it gets confused and caught up when it identifies with what's going out in the world, the scene, the movie and all that. And this is what those movies, The Matrix and The Truman Show and Plato's Cave talk about. As long as I identify with my body, I'm Simon Weber, I get a PhD, I work at such and such, you know, I'm looking damn hot tonight. All of that rubbish, thank God I'm not being seen when I did that. All of that rubbish and creates the confusion between the seer and the seen. So as long as we don't identify with the body, thoughts, the world, which is not to say you can't be in the world, but not of it, got to go to work and all the rest of it and do what you need to do, but don't take it too seriously. Realize that there's something else, consciousness, the seer. Because I thought about like HPB, she said, see what happens when you stop identifying. It's fascinating. I've never forgot that. If you don't say, oh, I like you, I don't like him, he's hot, she's hot, whatever, you know, whatever it might be, don't identify and see what happens. What's left? Do you lose any sense of awareness? Do we lose something when I don't identify, I like you, I don't like him, whatever, you know? Attraction, repulsion, I think you're good, I don't like you, all that stuff. If we don't identify with any of those movements of thought, then what remains? That's the question. What is the I that is left?
You said something, Simon.
Yeah.
The daily life is also very transitory, like you were saying, it's always changing. So that's a way of not identifying with it as well. You know, it's not always been the same.
Yeah, everything's changing, right? Everything's in flux. So don't identify, you know, poor old, you know, poor Mr. Trump, he's trying to get to the presidency because he really wants it. You know, everyone wants to be the top dog. I've stepped away from top dog positions. I'm happy to step down. I don't mind, you know, but it's like, so try not to get caught up. And this is an experiment you can do with your awareness. It's fascinating stuff. Just see what happens when you stop identifying and saying, you're good, you're bad. Oh, this is, I don't like this, you know. I've had 6 weeks of peacefulness. So she'll be home in 2 weeks. It's like, what am I going to do? I have to be aware of that, you know, because she's swanning around India. She'll be back shortly. She's going to do a big presentation as well. So that'll be cool. So yeah, what happens? So there's just the I am. There's just this consciousness that is there. And all the sages say, when you get out of the way, something else bubbles up. And it's naturally, right? We can't seek what we already have. We're already divine. The problem is we don't know it. So the problem is, according to Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I am that, he says, don't seek, just be still. Be still and know that I am God, you know? So that's the test. Don't go out all the time. Come home, stay home. stay in consciousness, stay by the fire, it's nice and warm, great. But we're going out, searching for this, searching for that, everywhere. So yeah, fascinating stuff. All right.
That could be our homework, Simon, not identification.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, do some homework, see what happens. Don't identify during the week, and we'll come back next week.
Children do that much more easily.
Hey,
Well, children do that because children will look at some clocks on things until they're instructed not to pass something.
oh yeah. So with and you've got it in your course notes. Just observe those things happening. And next week we're going to be looking at the 3 gunas, which is another. It's from the Bhagavad Gita, which tells you again in a different way how the mind operates and how we get tripped up. It's fascinating stuff. Because then, when you know how you get caught up of jail, how you're free. That's it. When you understand something, is there any more of a problem? Like, you know, Ismay's cracking the numbers for her clients. She gets something done. That's it. Is there any more stress? It's over. You know, when I was 22, I was trying to meditate, had a couple of beers one morning. That was it. It was over. I no longer drunk. I don't have any problems. You know, I have other obvious other problems. So I don't have to worry about having a beer. But, you know, it's like, yes, insight, clarity. This is what Krishnamurti says. So having that insight, there's no more problems. So if we know how we get caught up, then we're free. And what does Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj say? He says, we don't have to free ourselves from a world that doesn't exist, only in our own mind. It's fascinating stuff. It's just mind-blowing. And then what happens then? It's like, whoa, something else is bubbling up, you know? It's like the one. Fascinating stuff. So it's quite exciting, but it's scary too, because you have to leave all that you know behind. But then fear, what is fear? It's only of leaving. How can you be afraid of something you don't know? You're only afraid of what you know and going to leave behind. So that's quite fascinating.
What might happen next?
Yeah, exactly.
So-
Imagination. Okay, put that aside. We'll put aside our likes and dislikes. We'll put aside we'll remain conscious. We won't go to sleep. You know, and we won't worry about what I'll tell you experiment. I was reading Krishnamurti. I was like 22. I was cycling to work one day. I was working some pizza factory before I started Varsity. Anyway, I was cycling down this path every day, ripping, you know, quite fast. I spun out because it was wet. Next day I went to work. I took it much slower. And I thought to myself, why am I afraid of doing that? Because I just grazed my leg the day before. So I didn't go as fast down that path ever again. But so I was letting all my mind condition me, the fear and all the rest of it. But then on the other hand, there's a bit of common sense. You don't want to graze yourself again, right? But I spun out. I remember that experience intensely. Why did I not just go hell for leather the next day? You know? So yeah, fascinating stuff.
Listen, chat, comments and chat.
Oh, comments and chat. Hang on. Have a look. Oh, there's 7 of them. My God. All right. Okay. We'll go from the top. Hang on. Where are we? Oh, yeah, Edward. Thanks, Edward. We did start the recording. It's still going, actually. Wichanalander, excellent presentation, Simon. Engaging, informative, great flow, very clear. Thank you very much. Ash, great talk. Simon, I can't exactly remember. I remember exactly how you said it, but I love what you mentioned when about the sins helping you to gain spiritual wisdom. What did I say there? I have no idea. Yeah, well, all of us are sinning, right? We all sin. We all don't, you know, we all are not integrated. So that's all learning. Like in Catherine Mansfield, you learn from your experiences, right? Oh, yeah. Ash is reading The Initiate by Cyril Scott, great book. And what she say? JMH, who's the Mahatma in there, known as Justin Morwood Haig, he says, the sinner is closer to God than the Pharisees, because sins can be transmuted to gain spiritual wisdom. Very good, Ash, very good. Yeah, so you learn from your experiences, everything, you transmute it. And that's what Catherine Mansfield says as well. So yeah, excellent. And all the sages who know anything say the same thing. So then you know you're on the right track. Okay. Maureen, for you, Phil, or you disappeared. We could do our best to avoid unhealthy conditioning in the children. Also helpful would be parents or others able to recognize the core of their children's real self. Those parents are more and more recognizing their own real self. So we progress in due course. Yes. Great. And what else we got here? Hang on, Blake. I think you got something. Oh, yes, wonderful. Thank you, Blake, and Valentina. Thank you. Yeah, she could hear everything. Great. I put the microphone closely for you, Valentina. Excellent. Awesome. 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 I'm excited.
So,
Hmm?
we touched on what's happening with children.
Okay. So Maureen, Phil put a comment for you. I'll go back to it because Dean's just raised it again, okay, on the chat about children, okay? So Maureen there. We could do our best to avoid unhealthy conditioning into the children. Also helpful would be parents or others able to recognize the core of their children's real self. Those parents are more and more recognizing their own real self. So we will progress in due course. That's what Maureen said. Yeah.